Hey guys, what's going on? Jeff here from Films at Home, and in today's video we're going to talk about a very simple topic, but one that confuses a lot of new collectors especially, and that is, what is truly the difference between a 4K Blu-ray disc and a 1080p standard Blu-ray disc. So I want this to stay sort of high level, very straight to the point, but I also want this to be another informative and easy to watch video for anybody who's new, or even collectors out there who have been wondering this for a long time and maybe don't know all the benefits of 4K disc. So hopefully this will be helpful for everybody. If you already know this information, many of you may, please share it with friends, share it with coworkers, share it with whoever you think could learn about this. I think this will be a really useful video to try to convert more collectors to 4K. If you are new to the channel and you're new to the world of 4K and Blu-ray and physical media, please consider subscribing. I have a ton of content on this channel about these topics, about 4K reviews and things like that, which we'll talk about, and I have plenty more coming. So make sure you're subscribed if you have any interest in this world at all. I'd really appreciate it. And now let's jump right into it. So being somebody who collects movies, physical media, I get this question a lot from friends, from family, from coworkers, from people online, and that is, what is the difference between a standard Blu-ray disc like this and a 4K Blu-ray disc like this? What is the difference between the two of those? Why would I buy 4K? What benefits do I get? Is it just the resolution? There's lots to talk about. So the first thing is definitely, of course, the expanded resolution. When you go from a Blu-ray to a 4K Blu-ray, you're getting more detail. It's a higher resolution picture. It's called 1080p because it's 1920 by 1080 pixels. That's what your TV screen would be with a standard 1080p TV, and that's what a Blu-ray gives you. Now with 4K, that doubles. It goes to 3840 by 2160. So that's why sometimes you'll see 2160p TVs. That's 4K content. So it's not 4 times 1080, it's double the width, it's double the height for 4 times the total resolution. So you can sort of see here in this screenshot, if you're looking at a Blu-ray image and a 4K image, HD versus 4K, you can see how many more pixels there are, and that leads to finer details. That means the edges are sharper. That means little details like hairs and the edge of people's faces and the edge of a sword or the point of a blade and things like that are sharper and more to a point. They're a little more realistic. So that's like the first immediate benefit. You get that from a 4K TV, you get that from a 4K Blu-ray disc. That's very straightforward. Now, the one thing that people miss when it comes to 4K is that there are also other benefits which make this for a better viewing experience in a better picture outside of just getting more detail. The biggest one is probably HDR. Now, HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and what that is it's an expanded color base. It gives the picture more colors to work with, a larger color palette. The picture is also often brighter, it's a little more vibrant, and the contrast in the blacks and grays, things that often can struggle with poor contrast, those look much better. You get much closer to a pure black, a pure white. There's just a wider color wheel. Think of it like that. If you go into Microsoft Paint or you're working in Photoshop and you have your color wheel, things that you can choose, different colors to paint with, different colors to select for your fonts. Think of it like you've got your standard colors. That's your SDR, standard dynamic range. That's, say, your basic 64 colors, right? And you can choose from those, or you can go more advanced and choose from that color wheel and play with all the different red, green, blue levels. That's the sort of, think of that like HDR. You get more color space to work with. So it gives the people who are creating these discs and making the 4K discs, and the directors and the cinematographers and the people who do the video transfers from the raw files over to the disc, it gives them more to work with. And it oftentimes results in a more lifelike picture, a more realistic picture. Skin tones often look better. You can see here in a few screenshots that I've taken from the movie Saving Private Ryan, a movie which I'm sure everybody knows. I have some Blu-ray screenshots and some 4K screenshots. And the reason I took these is because you can really start to see that the colors are dramatically different between the two. You may not notice a huge leap in the detail, although it's certainly there, but you'll notice that things like Tom Hanks' face, it is much more lifelike. The skin tone is more lifelike on the 4K picture with HDR than it is on the 1080p with SDR, standard dynamic range. So those are the type of things that you get with 4K. That's the benefit outside of just the resolution. You get that massive leap in color space. So you're gonna wanna look for 4K discs that do have HDR. Some of them don't, it's pretty rare nowadays, but they'll often say it either on the front cover or on the back cover. You'll look for things like HDR10, HDR10+, Dolby Vision HDR, which is Dolby's version of this technology. There's a few different things it's called, but that's something to look for when you're buying a 4K disc. Now, the other thing is the disc size. So on a typical movie like this, say an Avengers movie, the disc size is probably gonna be 50 gigabytes, right? It's a pretty long movie. It has a lot of special features on it. And the Blu-ray discs were either 25 gigabyte or 50 gigabyte. Now on 4K, it's a larger file size, and so we needed to get a larger disk storage. And 4K discs now are typically 100 gigabytes, but they can also be 66 or even 50 gigabytes. Something like this, Avengers, I'm sure is probably on a 100 gigabyte disc. I could double check, but many of the ones that I review are on a larger disc. And you may be asking, well, why does that matter? And that's what we're going to talk about here. The first reason this matters is because it allows for advanced soundtracks. So one thing I noticed going back to Saving Private Ryan on 4K is if you buy the Blu-ray, you get a 5.1 DTS HD soundtrack. That's a very good soundtrack. The audio sounds good, but what it's doing is it's using 5 channels in a subwoofer, and it's been pretty standard for, say, the last 10 years. That's what most Blu-rays get, 5.1. And that's what most homes have. But if you've invested in your home theater and you've added, 7 speakers, you've added Atmos, Dolby Atmos capable speakers, which is something that's being more common seen in music. There's Dolby Atmos recordings now, there's Dolby Atmos on TV, and there's Dolby Atmos on disc. So if you've spent the money to upgrade, you'll also tend to see that most 4K discs have Dolby Atmos, but it's not necessarily true that all Blu-rays do. Saving Private Ryan was a great example. That's a very long movie. It's a very quality movie. It probably is a large file size. They only had room for the Atmos track on the 4K disc because of the larger disc size. On the Blu-ray disc, they do not have an Atmos track. It's a 5.1 DTS HD. So that larger disc size could mean that on some Blu-rays you don't get Atmos or advanced sound, but on 4K you do get the advanced surround sound. So it's something to look out for. Not to say that Blu-ray discs can't have Atmos, some of them do. There's a fair amount of them that do have that. But you'll see that on longer movies that take up some more space on the disc, and the fact that Disney tends to do this with all of their 4K discs, you'll see the Blu-rays missing that advanced surround sound while the 4K has it. So that is a benefit of disc size and simply having more space to put that expanded soundtrack on. The other thing that 4K offers that Blu-ray doesn't offer is better compression. So Blu-ray uses H.264 compression, which was standard for a very long time and is still widely used. If you do anything with MP4s, that's typically H.264 compression. What it stands for, I don't really know, the H.264, the numbers. I don't get into that. Just know that's what it's called. And then you go to H.265 for 4K. So it's the next step. It's better compression. And it results in about 60 to 70% better quality at the same file size than H.264. And now you're probably asking, why does compression matter? These are on discs. This is not streaming. These aren't compressed. But every movie is compressed. So for example, a lot of Hollywood movies are terabytes large, meaning over 1,000 gigabytes. A typical 4K movie, a 2-hour movie, could be 2, 3, 4 terabytes. An 8K movie shot with something higher level cameras or IMAX could be 10, could be 15 terabytes. Obviously, we can't fit that on a disc. So that original file size has to be compressed. And it's first compressed to deliver a final cut, usually to movie theaters. For example, I found out online doing some research that The Hobbit was actually 635 gigabytes. That's what was delivered to movie theaters. So if you saw it in movie theaters, you're seeing a compressed file that's maybe, compressed 2 or 3 times, maybe even more, less than the raw. Now 635 gigabytes, that's still too big for a 4K disc. So we have to go from 635 down to something like 70 or 80 to fit it on a 4K disc. So now you're coming down 7, 8 times more compression. And H.265, which 4K handles, does a better job of that. So the 4K disc will not only give you more detail and better color, but they'll be able to fit a better picture on the disc size than you could fit on Blu-ray, which doesn't support H.265. So when you're taking a 600, 700 gigabyte file and you're pushing that down to 25 or 50 gigabytes and you're using older compression methods, you're losing a lot of quality. Now, we're still losing quality going to 4K, but we're losing a lot less quality. This is what streaming services like Netflix or Apple TV, Amazon, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Max, you name it, they're going to be using H.265 compression to give you a 4K stream. Now, not everyone does it perfectly. You can have issues, and not all of these discs are perfect, and that's why people watch 4K reviews like my channel, and they read many website reviews and watch other channels, because not every 4K disc is created equal. That's the last thing you really need to know, is just because you buy 4K doesn't mean you're getting the greatest and latest thing. You really need to pay attention and make some of your own judgments as well, because you may not like the new color range. You may not like HDR. You may like the old Blu-ray. You may not like that the director made some changes on the 4K. Sometimes they do things like digital noise reduction, where they remove some of the film grain and smooth out the image for 4K, and you may not like that, so the Blu-ray may be the better choice. Those are all things you have to watch for, and that's why you should typically, do some research before spending $20, $25 to buy a 4K disc. There are variables. Everybody does it differently. You may not have the best quality. They may not have done the best compression. They may not have done the best color grading with HDR. There's lots of things to look at. But that's why channels like mine exist. Hopefully this gives you some solid information that, there's more than just resolution. There's potentially sound upgrades, there's color upgrades, there's better compression, a better quality image, outside of just the fact that you're getting more pixels and more detail. There's a lot that goes into 4K, which is what makes it a really cool format, and why it's my favorite, and why I tend to upgrade to 4K over Blu-ray discs, because I appreciate all those benefits and I can notice them. Some people can't. Some people may never notice them, but this gives you the knowledge you need to go ahead and make informed 4K purchases. And then, like I said, by watching reviews, reading reviews, and learning about how these movies are made, that will give you an idea on which ones are worth buying and which ones aren't worth buying. As with anything, there's going to be some good and some bad. So keep an eye on reviews and make sure you keep watching those so you don't make a bad decision. But for the most part, I would say, based on all the reviews I've done, 90% of the time the 4K disc is better, and then it's that odd 1 out of every 10 that's really not good that I don't like. So you definitely have a higher success rate moving to 4K, but you should be careful. Every now and then there's a really poor disc, and that's what I and other channels and other websites hope to let you know about. So thank you for watching. Again, I hope this was informative. Maybe you learned something even if you've been collecting 4K. Maybe this helped you think about getting into 4K. And if you already knew all this stuff and you've already been a 4K collector, again, this is the type of video. Share it with friends, share it with family. If they have questions, this could help convince them. And then we have more 4K collectors, which means we'll be getting more 4K discs, more 4K content, and that's good for everybody in physical media. So I appreciate you all watching. Make sure you subscribe and have notifications on. Follow me on Instagram, and I'm also now doing some short form stuff on TikTok. No dancing, none of that crap. I just post really short form, 15-second little clips about movie collecting. I'm trying to grow the physical media community over there as well, and maybe inspire the new generation, the younger generation, to collect movies. So you can find that link down in the description and follow me there, as well as on Instagram. But other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for watching.